On Tuesday, March 1st, 1932, Charles Lindbergh, a world-famous aviator, and his wife Anne Lindbergh, also an aviator, were having a usual night while their 20-month-old baby was resting upstairs in the nursery in their Hopewell home. The house staff had finished their work, and the child's nurse looked into the baby's nursery to check on him. Her jaw dropped when she couldn't find Charles Lindbergh Jr. in his crib. She ran downstairs in panic and alerted all the house members immediately. Charles Lindbergh Jr., the aviator couple's firstborn, had been abducted. Who could have committed such a terrible act? Was it a carefully executed inside job, or simply the work of a predator? Welcome to M7 Crime Storytime, and today we're looking at another case with the most insane twists you've ever heard. The case is also famously known as the crime of the century, a mystery which was marked solved in 1936 until a shocking twist came in. Hopewell is a township in Mercer County, New Jersey, which dates back to the 1700s. It was founded in 1748 and incorporated in 1798. Its warm and humid summers and icy cold winters make it a huge attraction. Hopewell is considered one of the more secure places in the United States. With a population of just over 17,000, Hopewell is safer than 86% of American communities. The chance of a person falling victim to a crime here is 1 in 316. Even with such a low crime rate, Hopewell became the home ground of the crime of the century back in 1932. It became the town where Charles Lindbergh Jr. was abducted. Charles Augustus Lindbergh was born on February 4, 1902, in Detroit, Michigan, to Charles August Lindbergh and Evangeline Lodge Land Lindbergh. Lindbergh went to University of Wisconsin-Madison to pursue mechanical engineering. He dropped out in his sophomore year and moved to Lincoln, Nebraska to pursue flight training in Nebraska Aircraft Corporation's flying school. By the time he got out of there, he started working as a barnstormer to earn money and support himself. In the year 1923, Lindbergh bought himself his first plane for $500. Soon after that, Lindbergh began flying solo and performing aerial stunts as a barnstormer. But this wasn't enough for Lindbergh. He then enrolled himself in the year flight training program offered by the United States Air Army Services in San Antonio, Texas. He graduated top of his class and served as a U.S. Army service cadet in 1924. The next year, in 1925, he earned a commission as a second lieutenant in the Air Reserve Service Corps. Looking at Lindbergh's excellent performance in the Army, he was promoted to a captain by 1926. Lindbergh was already doing well and achieving his dreams, but he became a true aviation icon when he became the first man to fly non-stop solo across the Atlantic. The journey was a 33.5-hour-long flight, which started on May 20th, 1927, and ended the next day on May 21st, 1927. Lindbergh took off in New York and landed safely in Paris, covering a distance of 3,600 miles. Lindbergh gained immense fame after this achievement. The newspaper reported all his moves, and there were multiple articles written on him which spread the word of his excellence across the nation. Some termed him as the Flying Fool, while the others thought of him as a true hero. On December 21, 1927, Lindbergh met Anne Spencer Morrow when her father invited him to Mexico City for a goodwill tour. Anne was born on June 22, 1906. She was the daughter of Dwight Morrow, who was a partner in J.P. Morgan and Company, and Elizabeth Cutter Morrow. She was raised in Englewood, New Jersey, and then later in New York. Anne first went to Dwight's School for Girls and then graduated from the Chapin School in 1924. She too wanted to become an aviator and was excited to meet Lindbergh. Lindbergh trained Anne under his wing, and eventually they grew fond of each other. They ended up marrying on May 27, 1929, at the Morrow Estate in Englewood, New Jersey. On June 22, 1930, Anne and Charles Lindbergh welcomed their first child. It was a baby boy, and they named him Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., also known as Baby Lindbergh. The media instantly covered this event, and soon the whole nation got to know about Baby Lindbergh too. The public welcomed and cared for the baby as their own, and even nicknamed him Baby Lindy. Lindbergh and Anne wanted to have a quiet life and raise baby Lindbergh away from the public eye and all the media interference. And so, in 1932, they moved into a newly built large estate in an isolated area in Hopewell, New Jersey. By the year 1932, baby Lindbergh grew up to be an adorable toddler with blonde curly hair and a set of blue eyes. He had a light complexion and a dimple on his chin. On the chilly night of March 1, 1932, Anne and Lindbergh and their family dog were spending the night as usual in their Hopewell estate home. Their butler, Septimus Banks, was in the house too. Bessie Moet Gowe, commonly known as Betty Gow, was at the Hopewell estate home as well. She worked as the child's nurse in the Lindbergh family. Since this estate had been recently built, some parts of it were still under construction. Normally, Anne and Lindbergh used to spend only weekends here, while the rest of the week they stayed at Anne's Englewood home in New Jersey with her parents. But due to baby Lindbergh's bad cold, the family had decided to stay a little longer until the baby had recovered, as Anne didn't want to travel with baby Lindbergh in this condition. At around 10 p.m. on March 1, 1932, Betty asked Anne whether she had baby Lindbergh with her. Anne was getting out of the bath and told Betty that she didn't have the baby with her. Betty finished her chores and went upstairs to check on baby Lindbergh. As a routine set by his father, baby Lindbergh was sent to his crib in the nursery by 8 p.m. every day, and nobody was allowed to enter the nursery until 10 p.m., even if the baby was crying. He did this to make baby Lindbergh stronger, as he thought of him as a weak child. When Betty went up to the nursery, she didn't see baby Lindbergh anywhere and panicked. She went downstairs in a rush and informed the other house members about the incident. Betty's first thought was that Lindbergh was pulling a prank on his wife and had hidden the baby somewhere in the house. Lindbergh was known for his notorious practical jokes and would often cross the line while pranking his friends and family. He'd hidden baby Lindbergh in a closet a couple of months ago and told Anne that he'd been kidnapped. Anne and the other family members stayed in a disturbed state of mind until Lindbergh brought out the baby he'd hidden in the closet for hours. But this time, it was not a joke. Baby Lindbergh had really been abducted. Lindbergh wasted no second and called the New York State Police. The police arrived at the Lindbergh estate at around 10:30 p.m. and began searching the area. In the nursery, which was on the second floor, Lindbergh himself found a ransom letter from the kidnapper, which was addressed to Colonel Lindbergh. About 70 feet away from the house, a pair of recently constructed makeshift ladders was found along the service road. The ladder was in two parts, so it could be easily carried. The ladder also had left marks on the wall on the right side of the nursery's window. The police deducted that these marks were made either during the ascent or descent when the kidnapper climbed in or out of the nursery. One of the two sections of the ladder had a split where it joined the other. This indicated that the ladder must have been broken while the kidnapper was accessing it. From looking at the ladder, it was evident that its creator possessed carpentry and mechanical skills, since the ladder was designed to retract for efficient use. Inside the nursery, there were traces of mud on the floor. A set of footprints were found under the nursery window too, but they were impossible to measure. This led the police to the muddy area outside the estate, which had footprints heading in the opposite direction of the house. The police tried to search and gather the abductor's fingerprints, which he may have left behind in the nursery, but the whole room had been wiped clean. The nursery had no fingerprints at all, not even the ones which should have been there, such as the baby's, Anne's, Lindbergh's, and Betty's. Soon the media arrived at the Lindbergh estate too and covered all the details. The news spread like wildfire, and the incident was made public across the whole nation. The police began the investigation immediately, and the case was their topmost priority. Initially, the police were sure of the fact that the abduction was an inside job, and someone who knew the Lindbergh family was involved, since the kidnapper knew very well where the nursery was and at what time the child would be alone. They first questioned the people who were present in the house when the abduction took place, and then the people who knew of the Lindberghs' unexpectedly extended stay at their Hopewell estate. While Betty Gao, the child's nurse, and Septimus Banks, the butler, were highly cooperative during the questioning, Violet Sharp and Lindbergh's parents' maid acted arrogant and altered her story multiple times. Violet Sharp was a lively girl who often enjoyed the company of men. Upon interrogation, Violet stated that she was out at the movies with a man on the night of the abduction. When asked to name the movie she had watched and the man she was with, she couldn't remember it. She later said that another couple had been with them, but she couldn't remember their names either. She even went on to take back her original statement and said that she was at a local speakeasy on the night the baby Lindbergh was kidnapped. Violet's constantly changing statements and suspicious behavior made her a person of interest in the Lindbergh kidnapping case, and she was frequently brought in for questioning at the local police station. In the first ransom note found on the windowsill of the nursery, the kidnapper demanded a sum of $50,000 from Lindbergh in exchange for the baby's safe return to the family. The kidnapper also warned Lindbergh not to contact the police. When the experts took a closer look at the ransom note, they claimed that the writer of these letters was of German nationality who had spent some time in America, based on the handwriting. On the bottom right of the letter was a unique symbol. There were 2 interlocking circles with a large red dot in the middle and 3 holes punched through the symbol. On March 6, 1932, Lindbergh received the second ransom letter, postmarked Brooklyn, New York, March 4th. In this letter, the kidnapper had increased the ransom demand to $70,000 as Lindbergh had gotten the police involved. The governor then called a conference meeting in Trenton, New Jersey, asking all the prosecuting officials, police authorities, and government representatives to attend to discuss various theories and policies of procedure. On March 8, 1932, Colonel Henry Breckinridge, Lindbergh's attorney, received the third ransom note. It stated that any intermediary between Lindbergh and the kidnappers that the family selected would not be accepted. On the very same day, Dr. John F. Condon, a retired school principal from the Bronx in New York, placed a personal advertisement in the newspapers and offered to act as the intermediary between Lindbergh and the kidnappers. He further offered to pay an additional $1,000 ransom to the kidnappers if they agreed. The following day, Dr. Condon received the fourth letter in which the kidnapper agreed to Dr. Condon acting as an intermediary. Lindbergh accepted as well. Dr. Condon received a sum of $70,000 on March 10, 1932. Immediately, he started negotiations for payment through the newspaper columns. Dr. Condon made use of the code word JAFC while communicating with the kidnapper. On March 12, 1932, Dr. Condon received the fifth ransom letter delivered by a taxicab driver named Joseph Perroni, who himself acquired the letter from an unidentified stranger. The letter stated that another note would be found beneath a stone at a vacant stand 100 feet from an outlying subway station. Dr. Condon got there and found the sixth note. This note gave Dr. Condon a set of instructions which led him to Woodlawn Cemetery, near 233rd Street and Jerome Avenue, where he met an unidentified man who called himself John. They discussed the payment of the ransom money, and the stranger agreed to bring along a piece of evidence confirming the child's identity. Dr. Condon was accompanied by a bodyguard at all times except for the duration when he met John. The man came to be known as Cemetery John. Dr. Condon received a baby's sleeping suit and the seventh ransom note on March 16, 1932. The sleeping suit was delivered to the Lindbergh family, who then identified it to be baby Lindbergh's. Betty Gao, baby Lindbergh's nurse, found the infant's thumb guard near the entrance to the estate on March 29, 1932. She recalled that the infant had worn it at the time of the kidnapping. The 10th ransom note was received by Dr. Condon on April 1, 1932, which ordered him to have the money ready by the following night. On April 2, 1932, the 11th ransom letter was delivered to Dr. Condon by an unidentified taxicab driver who received it from an unknown man. This letter directed Dr. Condon to the site of the 12th ransom letter, which he found under a stone in front of a greenhouse at 3225 East Tremont Avenue, Bronx, New York. On the same evening, Dr. Condon met Cemetery John after following the instructions in the last letter. Dr. Condon then handed him the same amount in exchange for a receipt and the 13th note, and claimed that he could be found on a boat named Nellie near Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. On one of Dr. Condon's visits to meet Cemetery John, Lindbergh had accompanied him too, but stayed in the car where he heard the stranger's voice when he said, "Hey, Doc." The following day, the police and the FBI worked together to search the area around Martha's Vineyard inside and out, but found no signs of baby Lindbergh anywhere. The events that took place during this crime were truly shocking and left a lasting impact on the public. But the real shocker was yet to come. On May 12, 1932, a man named William Allen, a truck driver, accidentally found the body of baby Lindbergh, partially buried and badly decomposed, about 4.5 miles southeast of the Lindbergh home, 45 feet from the highway near Mount Rose, New Jersey, in Mercer County. The bottom right side of the skull had a hole punched into it, and the left side of the skull had a crack. The autopsy showed that the child had been dead for around 2 months, which indicated that the child probably died on the day of his abduction. The Lindbergh family identified the body, which was then cremated in Trenton, New Jersey on May 13, 1932. This was a huge setback for the authorities and the Lindbergh family, as the kidnapper had cheated all of them, and they couldn't save baby Lindbergh. On May 26, 1932, the New Jersey State Police offered a reward of $25,000 to anyone who had any information that would lead to the conviction of the kidnapper or kidnappers. What happened on June 10, 1932, knocked the authorities off their feet. Violet Sharp, maid to Anne Lindbergh's family, took her own life just a day before she was supposed to show up for further questioning. However, her movements on the night of March 1, 1932, had been carefully checked, and it was ascertained that she had no connection with the abduction. The FBI still didn't lose hope of finding the kidnapper. About $40,000 of the ransom money that was handed to the kidnapper was marked with gold certificates, which were less in circulation and steadily reducing. The New York City Bureau Office issued a letter on January 17, 1934, to all banks in New York City, asking them to keep an extremely close watch for the ransom bills marked with gold certificates. They issued a pamphlet informing about the same and distributed copies of it to each employee handling currency in banks, clearinghouses, grocery stores, insurance companies, gas stations, airports, department stores, post offices, and telegraph companies. The case had already puzzled the investigators for a very long time, and in autumn of 1934, about 2.5 years after the kidnapping of baby Lindbergh, copying the serial numbers of the ransom money dollar bills paid off. On September 15, 1934, a teller at the Bronx Corn Exchange Bank noticed a gold bill with a license plate number inscribed in the margin. He found it a little suspicious and contacted the police right away. The police traced the receipt, which led them to a gas station. The worker there who received the gold bill made a note of the license plate of the man who handed him the note. The gas station worker found this odd because these gold bills were less in circulation now, and he made a comment about that to the man. The man then gave a strange reply during the transaction. He said, "I only have about 100 left." Observing this new set of evidence, on September 18, 1934, the police traced the license plate back to a man named Bruno Hauptmann and started to surveil his residence. Bruno Richard Hauptmann was born on November 26, 1899, in Kamenz, a town near Dresden in the Kingdom of Saxony, which was a state of the German Empire. Hauptmann moved to New York City in November 1923. The 24-year-old Hauptmann was taken in by a member of the established German community and started to work as a carpenter. He married a German waitress, Anna Schofler, in 1925 and became a father 8 years later. On September 19, 1934, Hauptmann realized that he was being watched and attempted to escape. Speeding and running through red lights, he was captured after finding himself blocked by a truck. In Hauptmann's garage, the police discovered a gas can stuffed with dollar bills worth almost $15,000, with serial numbers matching the ransom money which was handed out to the kidnapper about a couple of years ago. The police also found Dr. Condon's phone number inscribed on a wall. The police searched Hauptmann's residence thoroughly and in his attic found a wooden plank missing a part, which was similar to the one used to construct the makeshift ladder used in the abduction of baby Lindbergh. The wooden plank obtained from a section of the ladder was termed Rail 16. It was kept side by side to the wooden board in Hopman's attic and compared. There were differences in the dimensions of both the planks, as the one used for constructing the ladder had been cut accordingly. Arthur Kohler, a Forest Service expert, deduced that Rail 16 was once a part of the wooden board which was found in Hopman's attic. This was enough evidence for the police to charge Hopman with baby Lindbergh's murder and put him under arrest.
We have in custody the man who received the ransom money. His name is Bernard Richard Hauptmann.
The public already believed that Hopman was the one who kidnapped and killed baby Lindbergh 2 years ago. But Hopman's trial was not going to be a short one. He denied all the allegations put on him and said he didn't have anything to do with the Lindbergh kidnapping. Bruno Hopman's trial began. With the strong evidence the police had gathered, it seemed like a clear-cut case, but Hopman argued that he had an alibi to prove his innocence. Hopman claimed that Isidor Fisch, a fellow German friend of his, had given him a few crates that belonged to Fisch. Hopman said that he was holding on to Fisch's belongings while he went to Germany for a visit. In these crates that belonged to Fisch, Hopman found the ransom money. Hopman also went on to say that his friend Fisch had passed away due to tuberculosis soon after reaching Germany. This claim cast a doubt on a critical element of the prosecution's case. To counter Hopman's statement, the prosecution proceeded with a dozen witnesses, including Dr. Condon and Lindbergh himself. Dr. Condon went ahead and testified that Hopman was Cemetery John, the man he handed the ransom money to. When Hopman was made to stand in a lineup along with some other criminals, Dr. Condon stated it was too difficult for him to identify the man because when he met him earlier only for a few minutes, it was dark and he was standing about 5 feet away from Cemetery John. But he was quick to change his words and was suddenly sure that Bruno Hopman was Cemetery John. Lindbergh, too, accompanied Dr. Condon to one of his meetings with Cemetery John, although he stayed in the car. Lindbergh only heard Cemetery John's voice when he called out, "Hey Doc," from a distance. But Lindbergh, too, testified that it was Hopman's voice he'd heard that night. The prosecution then proceeded to present the similarities between Hopman's handwriting and the handwriting in the ransom letters. The handwriting experts noted that all the letters had a distinct start and stop quality. All the ransom letters were written in a way to disguise the true handwriting. But even with the attempt at disguising the letters, there were some strong similarities that persisted throughout all the ransom letters. The experts also noticed a few stylistic features in the notes. The word police appeared 13 times in the letters and showed a consistency in the unusual way the capital P was written. The word boy was also distinctive, particularly in the way the O was left open in the middle, which made it look like a U. This was consistent in all the ransom letters. But the one style that struck the experts the most was how the letter N was written. In the ransom letters, it appeared as if the letter N was written almost completely backwards. The capital D was also highly stylized. Consistencies like these and the attempt to disguise the letters led the experts to the conclusion that all the letters were written by the same person, and that person was most probably a native German speaker.
After examining the genuine handwriting of Hauptmann and the writing in the letters, there is no doubt, I believe, but this is the writer of the letters.
The next challenge that the prosecution faced was to prove that these letters were written by Bruno Hauptmann. The police started to compare Hauptmann's journal and the ransom letters side by side and noticed that the word boat was misspelt as bode in the ransom letter as well as in Hauptmann's journal. Other similarities between the journal and the letters, such as the open O, the laterally inverted N, and the highly stylized D, made all fingers point at Hauptmann. Even though all the evidence and proof supported the fact that Hauptmann was involved in baby Lindbergh's abduction, Hauptmann maintained his innocence. Hauptmann's wife, Anna Schofler, even went public with her statements to fight for her husband's innocence. She claimed that she'd known Hauptmann for a very long time, and he could never have kidnapped a child, let alone hurt him. The suspicion that someone from the inside too was involved in baby Lindbergh's kidnapping was thrown out by the police when they couldn't find a potential suspect. Even though there was never any credible evidence that linked Hopman to the Lindbergh family, Hopman was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and extortion in 1936. The authorities offered to spare Hopman's death sentence if he named his accomplices. He never did and always claimed to be innocent. The jury found him guilty, and on April 3, 1936, Hopman was executed in the electric chair at the New Jersey State Prison. Hopman's widowed wife had two pastors conduct a private memorial service in German for him and had his body cremated. Bruno Richard Hopman went to his grave still maintaining his innocence. Decades after Hopman was charged and executed for the abduction and murder of baby Lindbergh, a few theories started to surface during the 80s and 90s. This gave a new twist to the tale. Researchers and theorists looked at the case once again with a new angle, which painted a completely different picture. This theory placed Lindbergh himself as the prime suspect in baby Lindbergh's kidnapping. Back when the abduction took place, the police and Lindbergh's admirers were blinded by Lindbergh's heroic persona to ever even think of him as a suspect. The researchers took a close look at Lindbergh's life and personality and noted that the police overlooked a lot of red flags when investigating the kidnapping case. On the night the kidnapping took place, Lindbergh was supposed to be in New York for a speaking appointment, but he missed it. He claimed that he forgot about the event and couldn't inform anyone about it. This was very unlike Lindbergh, as he was usually very organized and punctual. During the investigation, when the FBI stepped in to take up the case, Lindbergh wasn't completely in support of their offer and made sure that he was fully in charge of the investigation. Later, when the police suspected that the kidnapping could have been an inside job, Lindbergh immediately dismissed the theory without giving it a second thought. Lindbergh even made use of unorthodox methods that went against the police protocol to find his son. He engaged a local mobster named Mickey Roaster by giving him a copy of the first ransom letter found in baby Lindbergh's nursery. Hearing about the case, the infamous gangster Al Capone, who was serving time in a federal prison, offered to help in exchange for a reduced sentence. Al Capone's offer was politely declined. Lindbergh was also a firm and enthusiastic believer of eugenics, a discipline that was popular in those days. Eugenics was a theoretical use of biology and breeding to produce a superior human race. It stated that only the fittest specimens of humanity should be allowed to reproduce. Lindbergh believed himself to be a possessor of such genes and was an early supporter of Hitler's eugenics program. It was also proved that Lindbergh maintained 3 other families, 2 in Germany and 1 in Switzerland. By 3 women, he'd fathered 7 children from whom he had hid his identity for safety. Medical records showed that Lindbergh's 20-month-old son, baby Lindbergh, had a moderate case of rickets. Some of his toes overlapped, and he even needed aid standing up. His fontanelle, the open area of the newborn skull that's flexible and closes in the child's first months, was still open. Baby Lindbergh was given large doses of vitamin D and made to nap under a sun lamp daily. Moreover, Elizabeth Morrow, Anne Lindbergh's sister, suffered from mental illnesses for most of her life. This fact was known to Lindbergh, and it acted as another strike against his weak son's genetics. This theory concluded that Lindbergh misused his power to cover up his own actions and made Hopman the scapegoat by altering the findings in the investigation led by him. Lindbergh believed his child was physically inferior and wanted him to be removed, especially when Anne was in the early stages of her second pregnancy. This seemed like an opportunity for Lindbergh to raise a more appropriate and physically superior child. This theory also suspected Lindbergh and Violet of being accomplices in the child's kidnapping. While Lindbergh decided to stay back home that night to make sure nobody entered the nursery while Violet took the baby with her, it still wasn't certain whether Lindbergh intended his child's death or not. Another theory that looped Violet Sharp in suggested that she could have been Hopman's accomplice and lover. Since the kidnapper knew exactly where the nursery was, it was suspected that the kidnapper had help from someone who knew the family and the Hopewell estate. Violet was certainly one of the very few people who knew that the child would be at Hopewell that night. She also knew the layout of the house and the location of the nursery. Violet had a poor reputation because of her affairs with multiple men, and it was suspected that she had a relationship with Hauptmann, who, despite being married, wouldn't decline an opportunity to mingle with other women. Kidnapping the Lindbergh baby seemed fitting for her, as the ransom money would be her only way out of the servant life and a hope to start a new life elsewhere. In this case, the theorists believed that the child's death could have been an accident. The twist in this case was so unexpected and surreal that it left everyone speechless. It was one of those rare cases that made you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was an adorable little kid whose life was cut short by a predator. His sudden departure left his family in trauma, which haunted them till the end of their lives. The recent findings and development in baby Lindbergh's case have reignited a spark and raised many questions that were ignored and overlooked back when Hauptmann was convicted. Even though it's still in question whether Hauptmann really abducted and killed baby Lindbergh, the experts in the crime branch and a bunch of detectives are still working to put an end to this case and figure out what happened to baby Lindbergh on the night of March 1st, 1932. Although if it wasn't Hauptmann, it's too late to convict the real culprit now, but still not too late to clear an innocent man's name. The baby Lindbergh case was full of twists and turns that kept everyone on the edge of their seats, and it still continues to captivate the public and challenge investigators to this day. Was Hauptmann really the one who kidnapped and killed baby Lindbergh? Or was he simply an easy scapegoat for someone more powerful? Was the crime executed by a single person, or did they have a partner who was never convicted? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe and thanks for watching.